At the end of winter 1977, Teresita Basa was found dead in her Chicago apartment. It could be just one of many homicide cases we know of. However, how this case was resolved was anything but ordinary. The killer was revealed by his own dead victim. Did Teresita come back from the dead to name the person who killed her? Teresita Basa was born in 1929 in the Philippines. The only child of a successful lawyer and his wife, she decided later to move to the United States in the 1960s to pursue a master's degree in music at Indiana University. It was common for her to give piano lessons as a courtesy to neighborhood children. Overall, Teresita led a quiet life with her husband, Joe. Although she moved to the United States to study music, Teresita later went on to study inhalation therapy and eventually became a respiratory therapist, settling in the Chicago area at Edgewater Hospital. On February 21, 1977, Ruth Leb, a friend of Teresita's who worked with her, called Mrs. Basa and talked for about 30 minutes. Leb later reported that Teresita was expecting a visit from a friend, but she didn't give any details about who she was meeting or even the reason for the visit. About an hour after the call, two of Teresita's neighbors smelled smoke. They informed the janitor, who told some other residents. Immediately, they called the fire department. On that cold winter night, the shrill sound of a fire truck could be heard screaming towards the address where Teresita lived. Once the firefighters finished their job extinguishing the fire in apartment 15B, they were horrified by the scene they encountered. There was a naked body hidden under a mattress that had caught fire. And not only that, but she also had a butcher knife buried in the middle of her chest. It wasn't long before the body had been identified. It was Teresita Basa. At first, they had the assumption that she was the victim of a rape murder, as her clothes were folded beside her body. However, a subsequent medical examination determined that she had not been the victim of any sexual abuse. After autopsy, Basa's body was taken back to the Philippines for burial. Regardless, a crime had been committed, and soon the Chicago Police Department was investigating the murder for suspects. Detectives Joseph Stacula and his partner Lee Eplin were in charge of this case. Over the next few weeks, Stacula and Eplin interviewed several of Teresita's friends and acquaintances so they could assess what kind of person she was and whom to look for as possible suspects. However, the police could not find anyone who could have killed Teresita. She seemed to have no enemies, so there were no clear reasons for her death. While investigating the burned-out apartment, they discovered a mysterious note written by the victim: "Buy tickets for A.S." Those in charge of the case failed to find out who was A.S., and eventually the case had stalled. For 5 months, the police had no clues and no idea who might have wanted Teresita Basa dead. But after 6 months, the police were contacted by a Dr. Chua, and from here, the case took a very peculiar turn. Dr. Chua was a surgical assistant at Franklin Boulevard Community Hospital, and according to him, his wife, Remy, was possessed by Teresita Basa. He explained to the stunned officers that his wife would sporadically slip into a coma and would begin speaking in another woman's voice. "Doctor, I would like to ask for your help. The man who murdered me is still at large," Juan claimed to hear from his wife while she was in a trance. The doctor said that he asked his wife about her identity, and his wife's answer left him surprised and a little scared. When he asked his wife her name, she replied, "I am Teresita Basa." The voice even tried to calm Juan down, telling him that he had nothing to fear. She only begged him to help her solve her murder. Later, during repeated trance episodes, Mrs. Chua claimed to have been stabbed to death by a Mr. Allan Showery. Dr. Chua said he asked the voice why Showery even came to her house, and she replied that he was a friend of hers. When Mrs. Chua went out of the trance, she did not remember what she had said to her husband. Initially, the couple was apprehensive about contacting the police and thinking they were being played some sort of prank. However, as soon as Basa's voice came back several times, they decided to then contact the police. The police were not convinced of the Chua couple's paranormality at first, but things had changed when Dr. Chua told the police that Basa's voice had also claimed that Showery had stolen jewelry from her apartment. Not even the police knew about this jewelry theft. How could the couple have known? According to Dr. Chua, Showery would have given this jewelry to his wife. On August 11th, Detectives Stokula and Eplin went to Mr. Showery's apartment. The suspect confessed that he knew the victim, but denied visiting her apartment. Not long after, he changed the story, claiming that he had gone to Teresita's address, but only to fix her TV, stating he would have left immediately after doing the service. But while at Showery's apartment, detectives noticed that the suspect's wife wore a pearl ring eerily similar to the one described stolen by Basa's voice. Later, Stokula and Eplin discovered more jewelry pieces in the couple's possession that had been identified as belonging to Basa by her family. After such evidence, Allan Showery finally confessed to the crime, that he had killed Teresita Basa. During his confession, though, he stated that he had gone to the victim's apartment to rob her so he could pay the rent. He only claimed to have gotten $30 and some jewelry. However, he apparently regretted his confession. During the trial, dubbed the Voice from the Grave trial, the defendant claimed he was just kidding when he had confessed. Prosecutor Thomas Organ replied to him, "Well, Allan Showery, you weren't kidding when you stuck your knife in her chest." During his trial, his defense attorney, William Swano, suggested that Mrs. Chua had faked everything because she had been fired from the hospital. He further argued that no man had ever been arrested because of a vision as far as he knew. Subsequently, Allan Showery decided to plead guilty to Basa's murder, as well as robbery and arson. Many speculate that Basa's spirit visited Showery in his cell, forcing him to confess to the crime. Others believe it is more likely that his defense attorney suggested that he admit so that he could receive a more lenient sentence. So, Showery was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the murder and concurrent sentences of 4 to 12 years for the armed robbery and arson charges. Showery was released on parole from the Stateville Correctional Center in July 1983, only after serving just 5 years. Many have tried to explain the case of Teresita Basa. Some speculate that Mrs. Chua may have known that Allan was heading to Basa's apartment and simply didn't have the heart to reveal it, only later concocting a story to cover her hesitation. Others imagine that the media could have easily sensationalized parts of the story. There are even hypotheses that Chua could have overheard Showery talking about the murder, or had even had a hunch. Despite so many theories, it is impossible to rule out the supernatural. And this certainly is an interesting case, with no definitive answers.